Dit is Argezoog Radio.
Een andere kijk op de wereld.
You're listening to Pateo Radio.
Welcome to Pateo Radio. My name is Johan Oldekamp and I'm founder of Pateo.nl. Pateo is a Latin word which means no longer hidden. The slogan of Pateo and Pateo Radio is, we liberate ourselves through knowledge. That is why the jingle of this radio talk show ends with the words, the truth will set you free. Today I have a very special guest. He lives in Canada, but also he has a German background. He used to fight fires, but now he's fighting ignorance. Hello, Raphael. Could you please introduce yourself to the listeners of Pateo Radio?
Hello, Johan. Thank you very much for inviting me to participate in what it is you're trying to accomplish here. And I'm glad we've met. I'm glad that we met the people that was necessary to bring us together because we are of like minds. As you mentioned, yes, I was a firefighter for nearly 25 years. I left in 2007 because, let me just say, I had to leave. I had, like a lot of other people, 9/11 was a wake-up call. And being a firefighter myself, I was at work that day and, the television set was on, and I was at work, and I saw the second plane hit the World Trade Center. And it was at that point in time, the first plane, yes, everybody thought, what happened? It's an accident. But as soon as the second plane hit, a shiver went through me, and I realized there's something else going on here, right? So my questioning process began in 2001. I started lashing out at the system as many people do when they wake up, and this is something we have to be aware of. When ignorance wakes up, it lashes out, and this is something that we need to be very concerned with because we are ignorant on a very large scale. So it took about 3 more years, and then I started getting away from this ignorance that had woken me up, or I was waking up to, and the journey shifted. Certainly it shifted as I approached 2006, 2007, when I eventually retired, because, as I said, I had to. Something had set me in a new direction. You could say, in a sense, I had become possessed, and if I didn't take reins of the possession and turn it into a passion such that I could take what I find and make something useful out of it. In other words, bring back an application for this knowledge, I realized I would probably end up going mad, as all other alchemists and all other seekers of truth eventually do.
Yeah, because the information can be so overwhelming and it's disconnecting you so severely from the reality most people think is real. So then you actually have a risk of losing it yourself.
Yes, this is exactly the point. This is something I found out as I started to read. I started to realize, hey, this journey I'm on, it's not unique to me. As a matter of fact, Carl Jung found the same kind of journey. You know, he saw the alchemists as his predecessor, right? He saw alchemy as a process of finding yourself, of individuation. So that was nice. That was actually a message I found after many years of my journey from Carl Jung. You know, he feels, what I love about Carl Jung's work is it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming. I mean, I'm almost 55 years old, and I will not have enough time in the rest of my life to just read what Carl Jung wrote down. But you don't need to, because all you need to do is realize that his summation of his life's work is basically, you could say it in one word, and it's called the mandala. And the reason being is because the mandala, the picture worth 1,000 words, is that object that allows you it puts you on that path of individuation. It puts you on the path of self-discovery. It puts you on the path of who are you, where are you, and where the hell are you going, you know? And that's sort of the awakening process. Once you're on that, and it's not unique to me, it's actually, as I say, once you get into some of the good literature, even the Shakespeare's, whoever, certainly within the work of alchemy, you will find that other people have been on this journey. It's an awakening process. It is truly, first there is shock. You're shocked by the awakening, but then the awe for what you are starting to understand and comprehend. It's worth it. That's all I can say.
Exactly. And I would really like to talk about that for the most part of this radio talk show, Raphael, because we have the same aha experience on a number of things. So, and I think we should help our listeners to understand why we have such an aha erlebnis with that. For people who are not familiar with you right now, if you go to the website pateo.nl and in the English section and you click on Pateo Academia, then you see a list of scientists who are working on science without boundaries, without dogmas, with just trying to understand how things are really, how they really work and how they are really connected. And I'm really happy to say, Raphael, that you're one of my co-workers in that Pateo Academia. So people can find your name in that list. And when you go to all the way to the right in the table, behind your name, you find two websites of Raphael. One is Kachina 2012 and the other one is AT37, and AT stands for alternative thinking.
Yes.
So people who are not really familiar with you and they listen to this radio show, they can put it on pause if it's not live listening, and then you can check out his websites because there's a lot of information there. So we're going to talk about just maybe 1% or even less of all the information there.
Yeah,
it's huge, but it's fascinating because what I really like about you, Raphael, is you just dive into it. You try to make as much sense as possible, and you go really deep. You really want to see all details that are connected to it.
You know what my strength is? I'll tell you what my strength was when I began this process. My strength actually was the fact I had weaknesses. And what those weaknesses were, as some people might look at it, is that I had sat on the fence all my life between religion and science, between creationists and evolutionists. I'd sat on the fence my entire life because neither camp, neither belief system had ever convinced me that they were on the right path in the sense, or that they had something that was enticing enough for me to bring me into their great halls of knowledge. So, but the one guy that knocked me off the fence I'd been sitting on for nearly 30 years, from 57 until the mid-80s. I was born in 57, so in the mid-80s I was still sitting on the fence between science and religion, and then JC came along. JC. Who's JC? Many people would say, oh, you mean Jesus Christ? Help you see the light. And I'm going to tell you something, allegorically and metaphorically, yes, I eventually did meet that JC, but before I met JC Jesus Christ, I met JC Joseph Campbell. Now, J.C. Joseph Campbell, who was a great mythologist, who taught mythology for 40 years, who was raised as a Catholic, and then as he himself started in his fascination of the American Plains Indians, he started to see within their folks, within their stories, within their creation myths, he started to see distinct correlations between what he'd been taught as a Roman Catholic and what he saw it in the structure. He was seeing within the structure of the American Plains Indians the same kind of structure that he'd been raised as a Roman Catholic. So that got him thinking, and that got him asking questions. And of course, back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, when Joseph Campbell was alive, we didn't have the school system we have today all set up to address all these questions. So he became a seeker. He became a seeker of the truth. And when you do that, you go inwards, and because it's the only place to go, really. Mm-hmm. And he ended up, like all seekers of the truth, he ended up going through India. Okay, as many people do, when you start tracing back the steps, you must You must pass through India and Africa, and of course all of these primal nations that have given rise to civilization as we know it today. But the beautiful thing is that Joseph Campbell never, in the end, after 30 or 40, 50 years, his entire life actually, the rest of his entire life was spent on these three subjects: religion, science, and he placed mythology as a language between the two, that he really felt mythology, the language of archetype and metaphor and allegory and all that, is that language that transcends between the two. That's why you would take a guy like Jesus Christ, who never really gave us specific, in other words, I'd have to ask, put a question out there for the listeners, where, if Jesus was so full of knowledge, which he was, but why was it hidden? In other words, find the math and science in Jesus' lessons. I mean, yes, it's not hard to find the ethical lessons or the morality or the wisdom, but where is the math and science? Where is the biology? Where is that knowledge of nature that Jesus was trying to impart that would help us understand nature better? Because everybody today, the people who are intuitive and in touch, they're saying, like the Victor Schaubergers are saying, comprehend and copy nature. So what was Jesus saying? What could we derive from what Jesus was saying? Is there anything in his words of wisdom and allegory and prose and poetry addressing laws of nature that we are just wakening up to? And I got to put it to you, Johan, that my journey of coincidences suggests that, yes, we are being led to an aha moment where science and religion will eventually reconcile. Is it in our lifetime? I don't know. I think, Johan, I see myself as a sower of the seeds, leaving in my writings now evidence of the patterns that I have keyed into that others have left, the alchemists, the Freemasons, the Mayans, in the Bible. It's all the same codes that I've come across, and I've come to realize that just like them, I'm not capable yet of putting all the pieces together, but so the best thing I can do is leave some evidence for those to come, for my children's children's children, and eventually down the road, we will put it together. But just like Isaac Newton didn't put it together, and all those that have followed him, Einstein and everybody else, has still not put it together, we are merely leaving seeds in the same way that we pass on biological information using genetics. You could say we're doing the same thing using information, using mnemonics, memetics, using things, information in such a way that can't be passed on genetically. I can't, Johan, I can make love to my wife or my ex-wife, and have kids. And yes, now that genetic material has been left behind for the children's children's children. But what about the knowledge? What about the wisdom? What about the stuff that allowed the ancients to survive before writing, the primitive man, when there was no writing? What tools were they using? And it's interesting, it can be easily shown that they were using essentially the same tools that we're still using today, and that's the symbols, the archetypes, and essentially the same kind of messages that advertisers use on an unconscious humanity, and everything I'm saying is true blue, because if symbols and archetypes were not powerful, and then advertising would not exist.
Exactly. I suggest, Raphael, we try to understand a part of that coding, the coding underlying the reality, and that's the coding of the numbers or the ciphers, because we have a common interest in that.
Yes.
I wrote a small essay or a paper. When you go to the Pateo Academia webpage and you click behind your name on the word magic squares, then you find a PDF file, an online paper, which describes a number of magic squares. And you've done a lot of work about the magic squares. I just put this basic information here so that people can understand a little bit of what you've done so far. My suggestion is that we talk a little bit about some of these magic squares and especially your understanding of it.
Okay.
Is that okay? Yeah,
That's fine.
Yeah, one of the guys also in our group is Randy Powell, and Randy is continuing the work of Marco Rodin, and you see a clear connection between the first magic square, the smallest one, the 3x3, also called the low shoe magic square,
Yes.
and the work of Rodin, Marco Rodin. Can you a little bit explain about that? How do you see that connection?
Well, it's basically in the number groups, right?
Okay.
It's in the number groups in that, in the magic squares, you find that the diagonals, if you use, when you structure your magic squares, well, the first thing I want to point out, what drew me to the magic squares? Why did I go there? And it's again back to how my journey began and how I ended up intersecting with the work of Marco Rodin and others as you follow the same kinds of clues that have been left for us, that people who get inspired. And what's interesting about Marco Rodin is that his inspiration came from the Baha'i faith, in that when he had his awakening, his epiphany as a teenager, and he's now, Marco, I believe, is close to around 60ish or something like that. But when he had his epiphany as a teenager, he was drawn to the Baha'i faith and to the Abha kingdom, the Abha, the great unapproachable great name of God, and it was through his interpretation of what had been left, the evidence again, see the evidence as you're tuning into the evidence, the clues left you, that he decided to take the name, and from those letters he derived a mathematical construct which essentially the numbers 1, 2, 1, 5 add up to 9, and at the end of the day this led him to the Enneagram, which is a very, very old symbol that you can trace back to the Egyptians, because the Enneagram is based on the number 9, and if you go back to the old Egyptian hierarchy, you realize there's the Enid, which are comprised of their 9 gods, and then as you go into this, you begin to realize, oh, there's a lot of other people, a lot of other beliefs that talk about the number 9. Like, for instance, in the Maya, the number 9 is associated with heaven. So you begin to see these associations between all these different beliefs. Mm-hmm. And it's actually confirming, and it's very affirming for your journey. When you begin to see the connections between the different beliefs, it kind of makes you feel good. It kind of makes you realize you're on the right track. So Marco took his idea of the 9, and he came up with the Enneagram. And it's all based on number groups 258, 147, and 369, or as Marco actually has changed it around, it now becomes 396. He doesn't talk about the 369. Marco talks about the 396, but that's easily understood, but we won't go there right now. But the number groups are interesting, and I'll tell you why. Let's get back to basics. Everybody who's listening, pull out your cell phones. Pull out your cell phones, and if you pull out your cell phone and you look at the numbers on your cell phone, you look at the keypad numbers, and you realize there's your number groups. 147, 258, 369. And so, can you see that, right? So take out your, right? So you can see that, the 147, 258, 369. There are your number groups. Now, what we actually have is, we don't have a 3x3 grid on our keypad, on our telephone, on our cell phones. It's actually a 3x4 grid. And that's interesting again, because the 3x4 grid, when you study esoterically the importance of the 3x4 grid, you realize the 3x4 grid had great importance long ago, especially in Babylon. And the reason being is because the 3x4 grid, or 12, 3 times 4, was actually the same. That was the breastplate of the high priests. Okay? The breastplate of the high priest connected to the 12 zodiac signs, 12 gems, 12 colors, many, many different associations. But let's just stay with the numbers and the shape, the 3x4 grid and the numbers. Now, the reason I say stay with that is if you remove the bottom line of your cell phone and you're left with the 3x3, and you have the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. What you have is, I can show you with a little trick that I found in an the oldest, I forget the name of the book actually, it's the oldest book of Chinese mathematics, which dates back, it's pre-Christian, it goes back, I don't know, 500 BCE, and around the same time as Pythagoras. It might even predate Pythagoras. But within this ancient Chinese book of mathematical secrets, which actually contains also a solution for the Pythagorean or Euclidean proposition 47, which is the Pythagorean theorem, which is a squared b squared equals c squared, which has to do with the hypotenuse of the right angle triangle and all of that. Mm-hmm. The Chinese knew about that. It's very easily shown with the geometric shape how that can be arrived at. It could have been known by the Chinese long before the West decided to say and give it credit to Pythagoras. But what else you find in that book, which is curious enough, what else you find in this Chinese book of secrets, this old ancient Chinese book of mathematical formula, is you find this little neat trick that we can use our cell phones to expose. So if you were to take your cell phone, if for instance, let me just have the listeners do a quick, if they were to get a piece of paper and a pencil, and if they were to draw two shapes, one is a square and one is a diamond. And in the diamond, I would want you to write out the numbers. I would want you to take your cell phone and turn it 45 degrees. So that what you have now, when you're looking at your cell phone, is a diamond shape. It's no longer a square, but it is a diamond. And you would place in the diamond, at the top, the number 1, at the bottom, in the middle, number 5, and at the bottom, number 9. So in the north is number 1, in the center is number 5, in the south is number 9, in the east is number 3, and in the west is number 7. So those 4 numbers circling number 5 are in the diamond. And the other numbers in the diamond, of course, now you just fill in the blanks. You put the 2 between the 1 and the 3. You run 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, 8, 9, so it all fills in nicely. So now that you've done that, then what you do is you go to the square, and in the square, what you do is now you change the positions of the 1 and the 9. So 9 goes in the north, 1 goes in the south, 3 goes in the west, and 7 goes in the east. So now you've formed a cross. And the four corners of the square, of the 3 by 3 matrix, the 4 corners now should be vacant. And when you fill those 4 corners in with the numbers, with the even numbers 2, 4, 6, 8, you have now created yourself the low shoe magic square. So what I'm trying to get through here is that, and why is that so important? Why is that so important? I've taken the cell phone, and in one move, I've shown you how taking a diamond, and it's important to understand that the diamond was known as the lozenge. And this is why the diamond is a girl's best friend. Because the lozenge, or the diamond, was associated in heraldry, or in sacred geometry, with the feminine aspects. Feminine. Whereas the square was more associated with the male. So, and then if you take the diamond and place it on top of the square, you now have an 8-pointed or 8-shaped octagon. And that's the basis or the beginning of the I Ching in a sense. So we've taken the cell phone, which we've connected to the breastplate of the high priest going way back. And it's interesting that I might suggest to the listeners now that yes, there might be a possibility that we've all been equipped with a cell phone that in a way has the associations and correspondences to the breastplate of the high priest. So we've all been given cell phones to become money lenders and animal traders.
Okay.
Okay, and here's something else to consider as we allow the technology to take command of us in our ignorance and we don't realize what's happening. Here's something else I want to suggest. We've gone also from like using keyboards, our keyboard, and And my daughter will text message me, and I'm not a great text messenger. As a matter of fact, I don't really enjoy it because I prefer phone. Sometimes I sit there when I get these text messages, I go, geez, I wish they'd invent something where I could speak to somebody on the telephone. And anyway, so we're going backwards in a sense I feel, because texting is good, but sometimes when I see people text messaging, and I see how they've gone from having 5 fingers on each of their left and right hands, and I see them text messaging with a single finger, I think, my God, is that a cloven hoof? Are they text messaging with a cloven hoof, with one finger? How inefficient is that? Nature is efficient. Text messaging with one finger or one cloven hoof is not efficient. That's just a thought I want to put out there. Because when you begin to realize that you can make these connections between a modern cell phone, and maybe we should spell cell phone S-E-L, L, right? L, which was an old deity. So let's spell cell phone C-E-L. Drop one of the L's. It's the cell phone. It's the tool that's been given to us in order that we may communicate, do business, trade, and do all sorts of things, but we must not allow it to become the master. This is the problem. And This is what I'm seeing. So the beautiful thing of being able to do that, and why that is so important, the low shoe, the 3x3, all of these magic squares, Johan, that you've laid out beautifully for the readers and the listeners on that website. This is where I came to eventually. When you begin to follow the coincidences, and this is the message. If I was to say something, try to get a message out today to your listeners. If you wanted me to sum up what I feel my advantage has been, in seeing things that perhaps other people don't see. Patterns. It's all patterns. It's all because we live in a fractal world. It's all about self-similarity. If we live in a fractal, self-similar world, then there's going to be patterns. You just have to be able to recognize them. When people are waking up to the Fibonacci, the golden spiral, and all of that, and how that permeates our life, how it permeates nature, and that's great. We're coming back to that spiral, helical, vortex awareness, and that's great. But what set me on my path, getting back to my opening statement, when I sat on that fence between religion and science for many, many years, and Joseph Campbell knocked me off the fence and started slapping me around and waking me up to the patterns, the inherent patterns that must be, that just is. That truth is truth from the word go. It's all around us, is that I approached all of this because I didn't have any specials, because I wasn't, again, getting back to my weaknesses. I wasn't that smart. I wasn't a professional, an expert in anything. I didn't have a PhD. I had grade 12. That's it. But I can read. I wasn't raised in any particular religious context. As a matter of fact, my parents, having immigrated to Canada from Nazi Germany, perhaps they were reluctant to push me in any particular religion or religious direction, and so basically they just let me do what I wanted to in this new world, Canada, right? So I was exposed to all kinds of beliefs. Early on, I had very many divergent friends. I had my best friend when I was 12 years old was a fellow whose father was from South Africa. His mother was from India. He looked Indian, Pakistani, and this was at a time when I was 12 years old, that he was my best friend, that the term Paki, the derogatory term Paki was very prevalent in Canada. But he was my best friend, so I didn't care about color, race, or creed, because I wasn't raised to believe any differently. So I was living in a gray zone, a gray world. But that weakness of not having any religious or scientific direction, or perhaps discipline, that weakness was my strength. Because it allowed me, when I fell into all of this, when I finally did get my final wake-up call in 2001, and I started going down the discovery of what truth is, I realized and seeing, when I started looking all over the place for where do I go? When you start with a thought one day that God is energy, and you haven't been, that was my thought. I'll share with your listeners right now. That was my thought. From where it came, I cannot tell you, but whatever reason, I decided to entertain it. And I hadn't So I had to start learning about religions. God is energy. That was such a simple statement, but I didn't know anything about God. I didn't know anything about science and how they determine laws of relativity and quantum and thermodynamics. So I started reading. And I soon realized, it didn't take long, that I started to see patterns between the different religious systems. I started going, could the 12 disciples in some way be connected to the 12 tribes, be connected in some way to the 12 zodiacal zodiac and the zodiac east and west? And because I didn't have religions or science saying don't go there, I went there. And I started finding profound coincidences, and that is my message at the end of the day. Don't be frightened to compare. I went looking as soon as I realized that there were common denominators, because truth is truth. To borrow a page out of Madame Blavatsky's book, I don't buy into everything she says either, but I do believe what she says to be true when she says there is no religion higher than the truth. And it has been with us since the first day. All you have to do is be able to see the truth. Truth is not going to arrive in the mail tomorrow. There's not going to be a 2012 email sent out to everybody, 6 billion people. Truth is around us 24/7, 365. It's up to you to wake up to it and to recognize it. And it doesn't matter if this is the same advice you could give 12,000 years ago today or 12,000 years in the future. Truth is just here right now. It was here yesterday. Do you see it? How do you see it? My advice,
Great.
my advice is the best way to see it is look for the common denominators, because each of the truths, each of these great belief systems that have gone through synthesis of hundreds, thousands of years, they have arrived at truths. They have, as I began to recognize, they left us the evidence. They left us evidence of the patterns that they had woken up to, and they have left it for us, for that when we wake up to it, we have our little ahas. And that's the great thing about, it's true. The journey is, it's not the goal. The goal will be great, because the goal will be one day we'll all be on the same page and we'll all go, aha, together, and that'll be the end. Okay, and then we can move on. But it's the journey. It's the journey along the way that one day we will all arrive as a consciousness, and that one aha moment will be beautiful. But we're not there. We're not there. There's no way we're not there. So, let me just summarize. I realize I've sort of veered off. I'm all over the place. This is what I want to say. I can, as you said about my websites, about the stuff I've written, and I'm reluctant to write a book because I love reading and I love pulling out more rabbits out of a hat. I love finding coincidences, because when I find the coincidences, I know what it is. There are no coincidences. If you believe in unity, if you believe in God, if you believe in some sort of unity that underlies the entire structure, the entire foundation of the universe of what is, then there's no way you can believe in coincidences, because coincidences, once you begin to see so many of them, you realize it's all just evidence of the underlying unity that we, with our 5 senses, stuck between the infrared and the UV spectrums, with our limited sensory skill set, have been unable to understand. That's what coincidences are. So when I'm suggesting to your listeners in the future, when they get a coincidence, when they get that little goosebump, or they get that deja vu, that is not a coincidence. That is the universe is just aligned for you. Past, present, and future has just aligned for you. And you are supposed to, at that moment, tune in and say, okay, what am I supposed to tune into at a much more profound level, and not diss it? Do not ever diss the coincidence or the deja vu, because if you start saying, this is just a coincidence, this is just a coincidence, this is just a coincidence, you will remain asleep. But when you do the mantra, there are no coincidences. There are no coincidences, Auntie-M. Auntie-M, there are no coincidences. Then the coincidences will start to arrive. And as they arrive, don't beat them down. Stop for a moment, tune into it, and you'll begin to realize that these feelings, these insights you're given are gifts that will help you realize and take you in that direction where one day you'll understand that there is a unity that underlies all this, and you don't need a PhD to get there. Okay, you don't.
Okay, great, Raphael.
Okay, sorry for the rant. Okay, go ahead.
I think it's a marvelous speech, and I fully resonate with it. But just to make it a kind of conversation, I'd like to ask some questions in between. Otherwise, it will be a long monologue for the listeners.
Yes.
One of the clues our ancestors left behind for us is the Rotas Sator square. Mm-hmm. It's the 5x5 square. For listeners, you can go to the same PDF file, and if you go to the page number 3 on the top, you see a 5x5 square filled with letters, and it's corresponding to the same 5x5 square filled with numbers. Have you any idea, Raphael, how old that original Sator incarvation square is?
The oldest one that they've been able to find, to my knowledge, is in Pompeii. So we're going back in the ruins of Pompeii. So that occurred in 79 AD. Vesuvius buried Pompeii in Herculaneum in 79 AD. Now, that does not suggest how long, 79, when was it actually inscribed on the wall? When was it actually put there? That's the only date I can give you, but what I find interesting about the Rotas Sator Square is that 1,000 years later, we then now attribute this to the Knights Templar. So all of a sudden, the Rotas Square becomes the Knights Templar Square. And I ask myself, why would we associate this very enigmatic, it's a palindrome which can be read in 4 directions, any 4 directions, which is interesting because that's how the Egyptians could read. They could read in 4 directions, left to right, right to left, up, down, up. And that's exactly what you can do with the Sator Rotas, or Sator Repo Tenant, Opera Rotas Square. You can read it in 2 directions. As a matter of fact, it was originally known as the Rotas Square. So you see, you have 2 versions of it. That's important for the listeners to know. Most people think it's just a Sator Square. It's actually, before it was the Sator Square, it was the Rotas Square, suggesting that it started from another direction. In the sense that you would read it going left to right, perhaps, instead of right to left. Now, this is all very important. This is all very important in the way our visual system works. Because, again, I just want to point out something that's kind of profound and simple, and perhaps how we've all been put on the same track. In that, if the Egyptians could read their hieroglyphs, if they actually embedded their hieroglyphs and their messages and their arts and whatever else that could be read in 4 directions, and I believe the Chinese can read in 2 directions, and there's many other cultures that could read in multi-directions, and if you speak Arabic and Hebrew and English, you therefore can read not only left to right, but right to left, and you don't tell your brain, okay, look, I'm looking now at a Hebrew script, read right to left, and I'm looking at English, read left to right. No, your brain does it automatically. But in English, but if you can only speak English, or if you were given primarily an alphabet or text, and you're only reading left to right, 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 guess what? We are only using I would have to suggest, we're only using 25% of our visual scanning system. I would suggest that if a TV sends us images through interlaced scanning, a TV receives images from a satellite. How does it do it? Interlaced scanning. In other words, it puts down one line and it skips a line, almost like odd, even, odd, even, odd, even. Two lines, one is odd, one is even, one is odd, one is even. The television receives that, and it puts it into an image for us. And it does that by doing it in 2 languages, essentially, interlaced scanning. We aren't actually doing what a TV can do. We're receiving the messages from from the cosmos, from our environment, especially in the Western world as English-speaking people. We're only actually taking in, as far as I'm concerned, 25% of the information from our environment. The Egyptians were taking in, if they were expressing languages, expressing communication in 4 different directions, which the Sator Square, going back, and now we're going back, 2,000 years ago, this is approaching the era of the Egyptians. If people back then were capable of taking in the information from their environment in 4 different directions, the the four sacred directions, north, south, east, west, and all that sort of stuff. And we're only taking it in from one direction, and it's being fed to us through text and through television and all that sort of stuff. I have to question, are we being directed? Are we on the right path? Who's leading us in that direction? What is our role in all of this? How do we participate? Because I really feel that yes, we're only using, at this point in time, 25% of our true visual system as far as hearing, sight, and all that sort of stuff goes. I'm going to suggest that if the Egyptians communicated in four directions, that we're receiving information from four directions, but we're just not conscious of it. So getting back to the Seder Square, that actually is, I believe that's the treasure, okay? The Knights Templar are attributed with a treasure that they found, and it's all become a mystery and rumor that they found in the King Solomon's temple, in the ruins of King Solomon's temple in Jerusalem when they were there during the Crusades. As rumors go, I'm going to suggest to you right now that that was the treasure that the Knights Templar found. And it's amazing when you follow the clues that I follow, which aren't scientific, aren't religious, they're more poetic. It's more has to do with the belief that we are part of one big kind of tapestry, and that this is all a game, and that we are participants in the game, and the magic squares make you realize that the games that children play are still the same games that adults play. For instance, the 3x3 magic square is tic-tac-toe. The 5x5 magic square, the Sator square, which people play, they go and they play bingo. Interesting enough, you look at a bingo card. In the middle of the bingo card is the letter N. If you look at the middle of the Sator square, what's the middle of a Sator square? It's the letter N, which forms the middle. There's only one N in the Sator square. It forms right in the middle of the Tenet cross. So does the Tenet cross in the Sator square have something to do with the tenet that we have made as geometric entities as we arrive in this geometric construct? Is there a tenet or a tenets we must live by as geometric entities? The coincidences which have led me to the evidence suggest that yes, there is a bigger picture going on. I mean, even the 9x9 magic square. The 9x9 in the Western world, everybody's playing Sudoku. Everybody's playing Sudoku, but when I point to them and say, you realize that's the magic square of the moon that they have you playing? They look at me like I'm crazy. When I suggest to them that you take the 3x3 tic-tac-toe, which is the low shoe, and you combine it with the Hotu, the low shoe in the I Ching is the later heaven, the Hotu is the early heaven. Those two 3x3 squares, when you combine them, give you the 64 hexagrams of the I Ching. And then when I say, oh, that's interesting, is there a connection between those 64 hexagrams of the I Ching, the 64 codons, ACGT, which comprise the DNA for all life on Earth, plant, animal, man? Is there a connection between all of these things that the ancients had tapped into? And at the end of the day, I have to say yes. At the end of the day, I'd have to say that the adventure I'm on right now, Johan, the adventure I'm on, and I'm close to showing some profound connections, is that it is DNA. It is our 3.5 billion year old DNA, which is an alien life form to us still, which junk DNA, which comprises 95% of our DNA, is alien to us. Which actually is turning out to be the spiritual DNA, and in the 5%, the genome that we've taken apart is the material DNA. So the Western consciousness focused again on the mistake, the genome, the materiality. They patted themselves on the back and said, look what we did, we dissected the genome, but then I say to them, yeah, but you threw 95% of it out and called it junk. Exactly. And nature is efficient. And then the Russians said, wow, that's right, nature is efficient, and some Russian researchers looked at that Western mistake when they focused on the genome, taking apart the genome, which it's great work, but they ignored 95%, the spiritual DNA. But the Russian researchers said that's a mistake because nature works through efficiency, and nature wouldn't embed into our DNA 95% inefficiency. There's got to be something there. And when they started pulling back the veils, what did they find? They found language syntax in the gibberish that Western geneticists did not want to deal with. They found language syntax. They've done experiments like taking DNA, placing it into a vacuum, removing the DNA, but the EM field of the DNA remains in the vacuum. So the Russian researchers have opened the door to junk DNA. And it's interesting because here we have now, it's perfect. It's a perfect paradigm or perfect example of the way the world is and how divided it is. Here we have East and West divided again. The Western geneticists have focused on the genome, which has to do with the materiality of the world, our livers, how we're put together, eye color, hair, and they've shown, and the beautiful thing about showing about the genome, and 5% that they've dissected is, DNA shows that the 99%, that this is the mantra we should be going for. Now, we are the 99%. Let's start using DNA as the emblem of we are the 99%, because DNA has proved that humanity is linked in ways that we are just finding out. 99% of black, white, the four races, the black, the white, the yellow, and the red man. The four races, the medicine wheel, the four colors of the four directions, those four primal colors. When you want to plot it as DNA, it says we, DNA, the Holy Grail, 3.5 billion years old, is the Holy Grail. It's the Ark. Knowledge of the DNA is what I would put into an Ark that I would want to pass forward through time and space with the appropriate messages so that one day this humanity will wake up to the realization that DNA is that blueprint that we should respect. If we want to be masters of this domain of the earth, because our DNA is also the same DNA that all animals use in all plant life, we are the keepers of that arc of that truth of the DNA, because our DNA is the same DNA that all life on earth works or uses to utilize to make life. So that's where my work has taken me, Johan, and we don't have enough time today, of course, but that's what I can show using magic squares, using all of the coincidences that say to me, say nothing more than evidence, that the Seder square, the Lo Shu magic square, the magic squares, the old world math suggests to me that there's some real treasures embedded in that. And I'm not the only person to come to that conclusion, because we don't have much time left. I realize I'm looking at the clock. But I just now want to stop talking about what I've done for a moment and where and these people I'm about to talk about, and these people are significant players. Marco Rodin is one of them. So Marco Rodin and John Searle, Marco Rodin is known for the Taurus. His stab, his gift that he is bringing forth, that he is saying, look what I found, look what I brought back, what my epiphany led me to. It led me to the Enneagram, the Rodin coil. Other people have made connections between the number groups and the Rodin coil to the number groups using the Lo Shu, using the magic squares. But then Marco Rodin and other people I know led me to John Searle. And John Searle is also a leading edge player in this free energy over unity devices, in the sense of a promise of the free lunch that's always to come, right? The Holy Grail, right? That it just keeps us going on and on and on. When I found out that John Searle, who's been working on his, and he also evidently, his epiphany came as evidently when he was 6 years old. And John Searle, I think, he's 70, 80 years old. I'm not sure how old John is, but he's not going to be with us, a hell of a lot longer. And I have a feeling that John will never see the fruition of his work, as all alchemists come to realize that this is for our children's children. And that's That's what I realized too. This is for my kids' kids, right? This is for them. Stand on my shoulders to see Marco Rodin bring it in 3x3, John Searle. When I saw he was using the algorithms of a 4x4 magic square of Jupiter, the 6x6 magic square attributed to the Sun, the 3x magic square is attributed to the Saturn, and then I said to myself, bingo! What am I bringing to the table here? What's missing? 3x3, 4x4, 6x6. Nobody's found the 5x5. And when I realized that I can show how the 5x5 Sator square is profoundly connected to the work of Roger Penrose and Ed Witten, string theory and twister theory, I realized that perhaps I did recover the Knights Templar treasure attributed to Solomon. Because, again, we don't have time to show this, and I'm just, Johan, you're one of the people I'm trying to get on the same page to see this. I'm trying to show how this treasure, and now we've gone from being a mundane, profane little game here, Johan. We're gonna now turn this into a Da Vinci Code kind of game. Because it is all a game. Because when you realize the tree of life, if I take you to an amusement park and I say, look at the tree of, look at that hopscotch over there. That's the Kabbalah tree of life. Look at that hopscotch game that kids jump up. 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 5, 6, 7. A hopscotch is the same structure as the Kabbalah tree of life. Getting back to the original thing, tic-tac-toe can lead you to the Loshu magic square, can lead you to finding about your DNA. Hopscotch can lead you to later in life, getting into the Kabbalah, getting into the tree of life. Go play bingo, and I'll say, look at bingo, the middle square, N. Why? Look at the Rotas square. Why did they only put one N in the middle? What about Sudoku, 9x9, 7x7, magic square of Venus? It just goes on and on, the 6x6 magic square of the Sun. At the end of the day, Johan, we have some exciting work to do. This has become a real-life Da Vinci Code. We are now in possession of Solomon's treasure, the 5x5 Sator square. It's an algorithm that I can show can be connected to the work of the leading string theorists in the world. So now we've put all of the great theoretical minds on the same pages, and it has to do with old world magic squares, which we can show has a direct connection to the way people in the past also made associations between chakras, heliocentric versus geocentric solar systems, so on and so forth. It all falls into place. Okay,
thank you very much, Raphael, for your fascinating explanation of so many stuff.
I'm sorry.
No, you've covered a lot of information. What this radio show is just is to help people get interested in this stuff, because there's a lot of information on your website. We'll together we'll also make more papers and try to explain things in more detail. But what this show is just to make people curious and to want to know more. So thank you very much for all your in-depth information. I'm very happy to work with you on in the Pateo Academia.
How much time do we have left?
No, the time is finished, Raphael. Because
time is finished. We're done, eh? Okay.
Yeah, so we only have 1 hour. Thank you very much.
So have you signed off already, or is
We're still on, but I'll say some words to the listeners, and then we can have contact after the show. So please hold on. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening to this radio show. If you have listened live tomorrow, I have a webinar. If you want to know more about it, please go to the website, theschooloftheholyscience.org, where I explain also about the seven visible lights. It's directly connected to what we've just discussed, because the numbers of the magic squares directly connect to the visible lights, to the planets, and they are connected to the days of the week. So if you're interested, please follow it. It's free webinar. And for everybody else, I hope to hear you next week. Goodbye, everybody. Bye-bye.
There's a reason for my teaching. even though I can't explain. More than a dream that you are reaching, more than a laugh that shadows all the pain. A special meaning in the thorn of dreams, in the garden where a thought can blind me. 'Cause I am lost here, where it never gleams, where I found that I screamed so blindly. Yeah. Until I rise up, fall down. Is this the reason that I can't feel the ground? Am I waiting for my tomorrow, or should I say goodbye? Yeah. Well, am I walking with a purpose? 'Cause I feel the same. And as I wait for my dreams to surface, as I wait I'm drowning in the rain. Just when I thought that it was over, I lost my grip and I hit the wall. A simple dream that I tripped over, now I have to wake up to my fall, my fall. Until I rise up, fall down. Is this the reason that I can't feel the ground? Am I waiting for my tomorrow, or should I say goodbye? Yeah.
Dit is Ergens Over Radio.